Okay, so hello everybody and thank you for joining us today for our Mimecast email archiving webinar. We're joined today by Johan Dreyer from Mimecast. And just a couple of points before we actually get started with the webinar itself. During the webinar you will be muted, but you can obviously submit any questions that you may have into the questions box, which is on the right hand side of your screen. There will then be a Q&A session at the end, and we'll then go through any of those questions and obviously answer all of those for you. The webinar is recorded, so we will make sure that we get a copy of that sent out to you after the webinar has finished. And finally, there's a very brief critique form at the end of the webinar. So, any feedback that you have, we greatly appreciate. And there's also the opportunity there for you to request a callback if there's anything that you'd like further information on outside of the webinar itself. If there's something that's slightly more detailed that you'd like more information on, then please do submit it in there and one of our specialists will give you a call back. So just before I hand over to Johan, just a bit of information about the Bytes and the Mimecast partnership. So we've benefited from a great partnership with Mimecast for a number of years now. Bytes have the highest level of partner status afforded to Mimecast partners, and this is based on our sales and technical expertise, as well as on our revenue and customer base. We are fully technically certified with the Mimecast service, and we do actually use it here at Bytes and have a lot of happy internal customers. We have developed a significant customer base of 100,000 plus users across multiple verticals, with some great references in the legal sector, within football clubs, insurance, manufacturing, and also within the public sector. So that's all from me. So I'm now going to hand over to Johan.
Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. I'm just going to get up my slides while we're waiting. Great. So today's session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a high-level overview of email archiving, the way that it has traditionally been approached and the challenges around that. We're going to take a look at how Mimecast changed that landscape quite significantly, and then summarize the business or the benefits that you as a customer could reap from this, or from using a service such as Mimecast. So archiving as we know it is really based upon a decades-old kind of mentality or approach that really dates back to the archiving of traditional paper documents that we'd write up by hand in the early days. So if you think back to where archiving really started, we'd write out receipts, we'd write out invoices, letters, all that kind of stuff, photocopy it, and bind it, or whatever the case may be. For records management purposes, that information would then go into a file. That file would eventually go into an archive as the sort of filing cabinets and things like that on premise became or started to fill up. We'd start shipping the older documents or archives off-site to an external storage location. It's not a terribly efficient way of working. It's also not the most productive way of working, because very few people would have access to that back-end archive, and at the same time it would, very few people would have access to that archive, and at the same time the access to the content and the ability to find the content in that archive is restricted to a few people who understood and knew the query or the indexes. Why organizations are archiving today really why the requirement to archive came about is focused mainly on two things. So compliance and records management in terms of governance or regulatory requirements to retain information, to make sure you've got a copy of everything in case the tax office come around, that kind of stuff. Or in the digital world now, it's more along the lines of proving that you have the records, being able to deal with cases that might come up, such as HR cases, litigation, or even just audit requirements. From an IT or digital perspective, there's always been a huge focus on storage management, so much like moving data or moving files and folders off-site when we're dealing with in the paper world. In the digital world, storage is a expensive commodity when you're dealing with enterprise infrastructure. The implications and impact of the growth in storage across other services such as availability, reliability, performance, all of those, and indeed backup and recovery windows is quite significant. So organizations will typically look, or IT departments would typically look at archiving as a way to improve storage management. Traditional approach is really to take, or is really to build your own archive service or solution on-premise or in a co-located data center using specialized technologies that have been built for this purpose. Now, while that does serve, or while that does help with, while it does help to deliver the business requirement and also the IT requirement of compliance and storage management, what it doesn't, or the one thing that it really does do on top of that is it displaces the storage management or archiving problem, and it creates an additional burden on the IT department and on the business in terms of finances, cost to serve, and operations in order to manage this huge volume of data that's on low-cost storage, difficult to back up, probably quite expensive to build out redundancy, all that kind of stuff around it. And that means that essentially all you've done is you've displaced the problem, you've made your primary application more efficient, and you've got proprietary hooks into the environment which don't help. The second challenge that this brings about is that archiving technologies that are deployed on-premise are not evergreen by nature. So that means that every 3 years, 5 years, or up to 7 years, depending on what your refresh cycle is, you're going to have to relook at your infrastructure. You're going to have to relook at the technology that archive is sitting on, that is deployed within, and consider consider having to upgrade it, migrate to a new platform, replace hardware. And in fact, the dependencies that the archiving solution and service creates means that you're quite typically tied into particular versions of a platform. So let's say, for example, if you deployed Enterprise Vault with Exchange 2003, you'll probably be on EV6 or 7. The moment you consider migration to Exchange 2010, because 2003 has become is end of life in April, then you actually end up in a situation where you have a much more complex problem to solve, because you need to migrate the Enterprise Vault or update the Enterprise Vault platform at that same point in time. And this is true across all on-premise software solutions and suites that integrate very tightly and using proprietary mechanisms and methodologies to hook into your environment. And again, these technologies and tools are typically not geared up to really provide value back to the organization. They're designed to be back-end dumps of information where it remains accessible to a few people. And the typical deployment scenarios would mean that if you're deploying, the compliance repository is kept completely separate and isolated to the end end user or productivity repository. So your users wouldn't have access to the compliance archive. The compliance people wouldn't trust the user archive to run searches, and that means doubling up the storage, doubling up the capacity, and the tools and mechanisms and methods available to the users to be able to access this content and to the administrators to be able to access this content is actually quite cumbersome and is limited in terms of how, where, when, and why you can access it. So those are some of the challenges, or that's the kind of traditional approach and some of the challenges that we see with archiving. Now, the good news is that there is a better way to do this, and the cloud is the platform or model that is really helping to drive this forward and to drive efficiency forward when it comes to information archiving. And that means that, or that essentially is driven by the fact that cloud service providers or specialist vendors like Mimecast focus and build platforms that are massively scalable, designed to service multiple customers and grow infinitely, and then have that dedicated focus to continuously improve and manage that platform. So if you look at the Mimecast service, we started off with something, or we started off in the email world, email archiving, and since then we've extended the platform and service to include things, include additional content sources and data sources, including the likes of SharePoint, link IMA and conferencing information, and then file repositories in terms of your network file shares and those elements. All of this information gets sucked up, stored into the cloud, or sucked up into the Mimecast grid in a dedicated tenant for our customers, or in a dedicated tenant that is cryptographically hashed. That is encrypted using AES-256 bit encryption and then cryptographically hashed. The data is stored in triplicate across 2 data centers, ensuring that all data resiliency ensuring that all data resiliency measures are put in place, and then on top of that, provide all the different tools and mechanisms and metrics required for the business and the end users to gain access into the archive. The way this works from an email perspective is that we operate at the MX level, or we can operate at the journal or at the journal function. As email transacts through the Mimecast platform, in real time we'll take a copy of every single message as it's transacted and as it transfers, either via the journal or on the inbound and outbound path, depending on the deployment model that you as a customer choose. That means that every single email as it's transacted is in the archive, and there's no chance or risk that a user might purge content before a back-end management, mailbox management task or archive management task or process kicks off. It also means that we're able to store very, very granular and very, very powerful, rich forensic information around the transaction of that email. And if we're operating at the gateway level, it means that the message that's in the archive is the absolute final copy that was delivered to the remote party. So what does that mean to you as an organization? What does that mean to your legal? What does that mean? Excuse me, I think something just happened. Okay. What does that mean to your organization from a legal and compliance perspective? Well, let's say, for example, that you have a DLP solution or data loss prevention policy solution in place today, and you have an on-premise archive platform. And that DLP service is set up so that any email that's sent out to a private email address and contains a PDF attachment with audited financial results matched against it, then it will strip out the attachment but allow the message to go through. However, in the event that that same email is sent to your auditors or to your banks or one of your partner entities, then the email and the attachment go through, are allowed to be or are permitted to go through. When that message goes through your DLP solution, or in the scenario where a user sends an email directly to one of these financial institutions that matches that DLP policy, but he also copies into the email someone from Gmail or Hotmail. When that service and when that email hits the DLP appliance and policy, it's the attachment is going to be stripped out on the copy that goes to the Gmail, and it's going to remain on the copy that goes to the actual or the financial institution in this case. The copy of the message that remains in the user's mailbox, because the DLP policy only applies on the outbound route, then becomes different to the copy that's been delivered to Gmail, although it's the same as the copy that was delivered to the financial institution. So in that scenario, with the archive copy that you have when that mailbox management process happens is going to be different to the actual delivered copy in one of those two instances. And you also don't have the ability, or you also don't necessarily have the ability or visibility of what policies have been applied, how that message has been manipulated on transaction at the gateway. So from a Mimecast perspective, where we're archiving at the gateway, we're absolutely archiving the final copy of the message as it's been handed over. And that means in any litigation scenario, when you present evidence to your lawyers, to your auditors, whoever it is that you need to present this kind of content to, at that point in time, you can provide an absolute, or you can provide the real content as it should have been accepted on the other side. The platform does also, as I mentioned before, the platform has been extended, so email archiving is the first step. Archiving email only should not be, from a compliance perspective, is pretty risky. So within that, what we've done is we understand that, and we've driven to actually enable archiving of additional data sources. With that, we have file archiving, which can hook into your SharePoint document libraries. Apologies. My computer seems to be playing up. In terms of file archiving, we can hook into multiple different repositories within your network environment. Those could be SharePoint document libraries. They could be file server, network file shares, repositories, My Documents. We can also hook into personal box and Dropbox accounts where your users link them, and we can copy content out of those into the Mimecast archive. Doing so ensures that you have a single central repository for all content and information for your e-discovery and compliance requirements. You can then surface this information back to the end users using a multitude of tools that we'll take a look at in a short while. Again, Link is something that's growing massively in the marketplace. I think when it comes to unified communications and the corporate productivity and collaboration tools, it's safe to say and a safe bet that Link is by far the front runner of all the technologies and tools out there. We're able to hook into Link and ensure that your instant messages, file transfers, conference content, and all of those elements within that informal communication mechanism are actually copied into the archive and are made discoverable to the business from a compliance and from a data retention process element. Your administrators or your e-discovery and compliance people, again, would only have a single pane of glass or a single window to look through and be able to search across multiple modalities or multiple different modalities and multiple different interfaces for the archive. From an end-user productivity perspective, we've got tools that hook into Outlook. So we've got an Outlook plugin. We've got mobile applications for all major mobile devices and all major smartphones and tablets. And these devices are designed to, or these applications and integration methods are designed from the ground up to make the user experience as simple and seamless as possible, while ensuring they have access to their archive content regardless of where they are, on what device, and what they're trying to achieve with it. Obviously, this brings up, or obviously some companies would want to control this access and this mechanism and access to these services. So we do provide the administrative or back-end control to be able to switch these services on and off on a per user, on a group, or on a domain type level. From a corporate compliance perspective, as I've mentioned a couple of times, we provide a single pane of glass or single interface from which the corporate compliance, e-discovery, HR, whoever it is that needs to run these discovery searches can log in, run a search across multiple different information, across data from multiple different data sources, retrieve the results, refine those results, request an export, and create litigation scenarios, cases, etc., to be able to support the workflows required within your environment. Everything here is controlled by a very, very, very granular roles-based access control solution in the back end or policy that ensures that if you had to tier out who has access and capability to do what within the e-discovery console, within or within the rest of the Mimecast console, then you'd be able to do that, and you'd be able to ensure that a junior HR representative or a data management person would only be able to log in, run searches, and save those, which would then be reviewed by someone more senior who would be able to request the export that can then be downloaded by someone with the appropriate content access or content viewer permissions. So very powerful, very granular in the way that we do it, and it's all a web-based and web-driven console. Again, all managed by a roles-based access control that will either show or hide the functionality available to the user who's logged in at that point in time. From an IT perspective, you have a single console to log into when it comes to managing the policies, managing the services. The retention in the archive by default is perpetual, so we'll keep all information forever unless, as a customer, you decide to modify those retention periods. You can essentially go in and say, we have a 7-year retention policy, therefore reduce the retention from perpetual to 7 years. Likewise, in terms of data purge, you'd need 2 people with the correct access and the correct permissions to log into the service platform, collect the information that needs to be purged together, purge that content, or request the purge and then approve the purge for that content to be removed from the actual archive. So it's not possible for normal administrators or even end users to go into the archive and remove content from it, either accidentally on purpose or in a malicious fashion. It has to be done via a specific process and procedure. Everything that you do on the platform is audited and logged, and those logs are retained for the duration or lifetime of your account. So when the auditors come around and say, we want to be able to see, we want to know how you're tracking who accesses the archive, who runs searches, what the queries are, and who tries to access emails, you've got all the framework and all the tools required available to you as part of the service platform to say, we can see when Joe Black logged in, we can see that he searched for email from Johan to Helen, and we can see that he tried to open the email that said Bytes email archiving webinar. And we can see whether he actually had the permission to view the content or not. In terms of benefits to your organization, we deliver quite a few key benefits. From a business perspective, we are an independent, flexible, and malleable archive that allows you to, at a fixed cost per annum, continuously store and retain information regardless of the volume of information within there. It's a safer and more secure place to store information as well. We protect and safeguard and are trusted custodians of information for over 8,500 customers globally. We operate data center grids out of the UK, the US, South Africa, and Australia, and the offshore areas, or the offshore islands. And those data center grids are isolated, siloed environments, which means that essentially, from a data jurisdiction and the proliferation of information across borders, our customers have absolute guarantees that their information resides within a particular geography, and that it will never be copied by Mimecast outside of those geographies, unless specifically required or requested by the customer. From a compliance driver perspective, we offer a perpetual bottomless archive. Everything's audited and logged, real-time archiving, and we've got the rich forensic information that's required for you to be able to prove, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the email that the messages in the archive or the content in the archive is what is being delivered on the other side, or that the other side has manipulated or managed that. We also don't allow accidental or malicious purging of content by applying a strict multi-step process to remove it, requiring specific access rights. So that means, again, you're protected from a compliance perspective in terms of people just removing data from the archive at any point in time. From an end user perspective, as an end user, the Mimecast approach and the archive makes me more productive. How does it do that? It allows me to access my archive content, whether it be emails, files, or data from my Box, Dropbox account, etc., from my mobile device, my tablet, a web browser, or even Outlook, using familiar self-service interfaces, or familiar, easy-to-use interfaces. And it also allows, and once I've accessed that content, I have the ability to download a copy, work on it. I can then email it from the device that I'm working on, or I can then save it back to my file server to ensure that copy goes back online. It means that, in addition, we also provide advanced integration functionality with services like Exchange, which will allow you to do automated mailbox management across the various services that we hook into. From an IT perspective, the key benefits are that you've got a single, unified, integrated solution. Let me iterate here that the entire platform and service is Mimecast proprietary, homegrown, developed, maintained, managed software, which means that we integrate very seamlessly and very tightly across all the different services and platforms that we offer. It means that we're extremely agile and proactive when it comes to developing the platform, when it comes to response to market requirements. And it means that we're also not dependent on third-party technologies or or the roadmaps of third parties when it comes to improving or bug fixes within the product and service. We provide a fixed cost model, fixed cost-based model. We manage all the infrastructure on your behalf, and it's our responsibility to manage the data centers, infrastructure, power, storage, all that kind of stuff. But you as the customer and you as the IT department retain full access into how the services work for your environment and for your end users. From a mailbox and storage management perspective, we support stubbing, we support automated purge of data, or automated deletion of objects based on expiry parameters that you set. And that really helps in two ways. One is that you can still meet your current mailbox management requirements from an email perspective, and two, that if you do have a policy, and we do recommend approaching or going down the route of removing objects rather than stubbing them from mailboxes, but if you do have a policy to actually purge data from mailboxes after a certain period of time, our systems and our services will run a validation process to check and make sure and verify that the content that needs to be deleted from the mailbox does exist in the archive and can support your environment and can therefore be deleted without risk. In terms of flexibility, anyone who's worked with or deployed an on-premise solution for archiving knows that there are proprietary hooks into the messaging platform and environment. There are proprietary hooks into other services that there may be, or that you may be using and archiving from. And this means two things. One, every time you want to upgrade the primary application, it means that you need to consider the archive. And two, if you were to change strategy or direction in your environment, so let's say you were to go from Lotus Domino to Exchange 2010 or 2013, and then with a view or plan in future of going to Office 365, the implications of that journey, the cost of that journey, is again dependent on the archive. Using a solution like Mimecast, where we deliver the service over the internet and therefore integrate using industry standard internet protocols with your services and with your environments, and providing minimal footprint integration points on premise, it means that your archive is essentially independent and flexible and can move with the strategy of your organization. So in this case, there would be no data requirement, or in the case of moving from Notes or from Domino to Exchange to Office 365, there would be no requirement to migrate the archive data, because the archive would be able to move across those technologies seamlessly and efficiently by working at the transport layer and by working at the journal layer. Now, archiving is not the only thing that Mimecast does. The business and Mimecast business model is focused primarily on three core, on unified information management, and that really boils down to unified email management at the core, which is predominantly based on three core pillars. The first is security, so email security, where we provide a comprehensive and ever-changing or ever-improving security stack to email, taking care of not only your antivirus, anti-spam type SMTP hygiene stuff, but including components such as stationery and disclaimer management, data loss prevention, content examination, encryption services, and working on a sophisticated multi-layered approach to protect our customers from things like your network and application denial of service attacks, application layer threats like phishing, spear phishing, and then your standard malware and spam type of elements. The archiving component is another key component of the service and platform, and with the archiving component and security components locked in together, we're uniquely positioned to provide business continuity for email from Outlook, mobile devices, and the web browser console, so that in the event your email service or your Exchange server becomes unavailable for whatever reason, your users would be able to continue sending and receiving emails or transacting emails via the mobile devices, Outlook, and the Mimecast web browser interface. With that, I'm going to hand back to Sarah and open the floor to questions.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions that have come through already. So whilst anybody who's got any other questions is just filling that into the question box now, and we'll make a start on the other ones. So the first question has come through from John, who asks, great that data is stored in triplicate. Are all your data centers UK based?
So yes, we've got data centers in the UK, the US, Channel Islands, South Africa, and Australia. Customers in the EU are typically provisioned out of the UK, but you can choose to have you can ask for for particular residency that suits you, or data residency and provisioning that suits your organizational requirements. If you're provisioned in one region, your data will never be replicated out of that region by Mimecast.
Okay, lovely. And another question here. If moving from another archiving system to Mimecast, do you have data migration tools to help with this, rather than having to restore the existing archives back to Exchange mailboxes? No doubt this is dependent on the existing product.
Very good question. So we do provide data ingestion as a service, which is purchasable. What we don't do at the moment, and this may change in the near future, is we don't provide the extraction service for various reasons. We do work with partners, so the likes of Bytes and various other archive migration specialist partners, who would be able to facilitate and assist customers with the extraction of the data from their existing Exchange environments and archive solutions into a format that is consumable by Mimecast, and then provide that to us for the ingestion. The whole process is project managed by Mimecast, and we do have significant experience of doing this with the rest of our customer base. So it is fully managed, fully supported, and it's something we've done quite regularly.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And Wayne says, is it possible to get a copy of the slides? That's no problem, I can send that out to you afterwards. And a question here from Andy, who says, how much per mailbox or per gigabyte?
Okay, so two elements to that, or two elements to the answer to that question. First of all is the actual pricing or the licensing model. There's obviously, the email archiving licensing model is per email transacting user per annum. So what we define, or what we term as an email transacting user, is per physical person. So anyone who sends and receives email within the environment or the organization. And that excludes things like shared mailboxes, aliases, distribution lists, etc., because those are not actually considered email transacting users. The second piece, the file archiving, is billed per gigabyte per annum with certain bands attached to it, and the pricing varies entirely on the volume. So the pricing is obviously quite different based on the service that you select for 100 users and, let's say, 10,000 users. The best approach, I would say, to ensuring that you get the absolute correct pricing and or a good idea of the pricing brackets and bands that you fall into, would be to follow up with your Bytes account manager to set up a session with one of our sales team and go through the commercial offering.
Lovely, thank you. And if there are obviously any other questions, please do feel free to pop those in the questions box now. We'll just give it another minute in case anybody has got any final questions. No, I think that's everything. So thank you very much to Johan for presenting for us. Thank you very much for joining us today. And obviously, as I said, if you do want to get in touch with us, then please do so. There's an email address there on the screen, tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. And thank you very much for joining us today.